The night had teeth. It bit through the skin and gnawed at the bones. The kind of cold that turned breath into shards of ice and made even the stars tremble above the plains. The rancher was making his last round through the corral, lantern swinging from his calloused hand, when he heard something faint, almost like a cry. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks again, moaning across the frozen hills. But then it came again, softer, weaker, broken bar human. He turned sharply, the glow of his lantern slicing through the swirling snow. The sound was coming from beyond the fence, near the edge of the ravine where the land fell into a nest of wild mesquite. No sane soul would wander there at this hour, and not unless death had already taken half of them. He hesitated, jaw clenched. Wolves hunted near the ridges this time of year, and worse things than wolves sometimes roamed the night. Still, something in that cry pulled him. He lifted his rifle from his shoulder, cocked it, and stepped out into the dark. The snow crunched under his boots, the wind tugged at his coat, and his lantern flickered as though afraid of what it might reveal. Then he saw her. She stood up, or rather, barely stood just beyond the wooden fence. Her hair hung in long, tangled strands, stiff with frost. Her bare feet were sunk in snow, blue and swollen. The rag she wore was torn and soaked, sticking to her skin like paper to glass. She looked like a ghost, the one that had wandered too far from the fire of life and was now trying desperately to find her way back. The rancher froze. He had heard stories of Apache raiders disguising themselves, of traps set for unwary men, but this woman, a broken bar, she didn't look like a threat. She looked broken. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her breath coming in short bursts of fog. Her eyes dark, wide, and shimmering with pain locked onto his. "Please see broken bar." Her voice was so faint he barely caught it through the wind. "I got frostbite, a broken bar. I need to warm up, a broken bar." The rancher's grip on his rifle loosened, though not completely. He took a step forward, his boots crunching the snow, and lifted the lantern higher. The light washed over her face, and for a heartbeat he forgot to breathe. She couldn't have been more than 20, though the suffering had aged her. High cheekbones, delicate features, her heritage was unmistakable. Apache. He lowered the rifle slightly, uncertain. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice rough. "Not tonight, not ever." She swayed on her feet, barely listening. "A broken bar walked all night," she murmured. "The colder broken bar it burns." Her words trembled as much as her body. He looked around. The wind howled louder now, carrying a flurry of snow that stung his face. If he left her out there, she'd be dead before the hour was out. But if he brought her in a broken bar, it could mean trouble. The local man didn't take kindly to anyone sheltering Apaches, and the tribes themselves didn't forgive betrayal. Her knees buckled, and before he could think, he lunged forward, catching her before she fell. Her body was as cold as stone, lighter than it should have been. She let out a broken sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "Easy," he muttered, pulling her upright. "You walk, you live. You stop, you freeze." He draped his coat over her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, the wool already damp from her melting frost. She clutched it tightly, her trembling hands barely able to hold it closed. The rancher guided her toward the cabin, his jaw set in grim determination. The snow bit at them both, but he pushed forward, dragging her half the way when her legs failed. Inside, the cabin was dim, lit only by the dying glow of the hearth. He dropped the lantern on the table and pulled her toward the fire. She stumbled to her knees before it, reaching out her hands. The heat made her flinch, a cry tearing from her throat as life returned to her frozen fingers. The rancher quickly knelt beside her, grabbing a blanket from the cot. "Don't get too close," he said. "You'll burn yourself before you thaw." He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, his rough hands brushing against skin that felt like ice. She was crying silently now, not from fear but from the pain of feeling returning to her limbs. Her blackened fingertips trembled, and she tried to rub them together, but they barely moved. "It hurts," she whispered. "That's good," he said, pulling still closer. "Means you're still alive." She looked up at him through the curtain of her wet hair, eyes full of something between gratitude and sorrow. "Why a broken bar? You help me?" she asked weakly. He sat back, resting his elbows on his knees. "'Cause I can't let a person freeze on my land, even if she might be the kind who'd shoot me come spring." Her lips twitched, the hint of a smile ghosting across her face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Her gaze dropped to her hands again, and she began to whisper softly, words he didn't understand, maybe prayers, maybe names. The sounds were foreign but full of pain, full of loss. The rancher leaned back, studying her in silence. There was something strange about her presence, something more than fear and frostbite. She carried secrets heavy enough to drag her through a storm instead of back to her people. He stood, threw another log on the fire, and filled a cup with water from the kettle. Here, he said, kneeling again. She drank slowly, her lips barely touching the tin cup. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated, then whispered, Taya. He nodded. Name's Cole. For a long while, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the moaning wind outside. Her breathing steadied, though her body still shook with the shock of the cold. She looked around the cabin at the rifle on the wall, the saddle leaning by the door, the pair of boots drying by the hearth. Her eyes softened. You live alone, she murmured. Most men do out here, he replied. Easier that way. Her head dropped slightly, as though she understood too well. Alone, a broken bar means no one to bury you if you die. Cole looked at her sharply, surprised by the calm in her tone. Let's not test that theory tonight. A faint smile flickered in her eyes, but it was gone as soon as a gust rattled the window shutters. She flinched, eyes darting toward the sound. Instinct, he realized. Fear of pursuit. Cole's brow furrowed. You running from something, Taya? She didn't answer. Her gaze was distant, locked on the fire. After a moment, she said quietly, if I tell you a broken bar you'll wish you'd left me in the snow. He studied her in the flickering light. She was still trembling, her hands blackened, her body fragile, but in her eyes there was a spark of defiance, of something unbroken. He couldn't tell if it was courage or a curse. Cole leaned back, exhaled, and rubbed his neck. Well, he muttered, too late for that now. Outside, the wind wailed through the trees like a warning, but inside the little cabin, the warmth slowly crept back into her bonanza and unknowingly, into the man who'd risked everything to save her. Yet, as he looked at her one last time before dousing the lantern, he couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't just brought in a half-frozen woman from the storm, a broken bar, but the storm itself. The fire crackled low, throwing restless shadows against the cabin walls. Outside, the storm had softened into silence, but inside, the air felt thick, like something unspoken was hanging between them. Cole sat across from Taya, sharpening his knife against the whetstone out of habit, his eyes flicking toward her every few seconds. She sat trapped in his blanket, motionless except for the trembling of her fingers. He tended to the frostbite as best he could, rubbing her hands with oil, wrapping her feet in strips of warm cloth. But it was the way she stared at the flames that worried him more than the wounds. She didn't look like someone who'd escaped naturally, she looked like someone escaping people. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. You think I came here to steal or to hurt? Cole didn't stop sharpening. I think you came here to live, he said evenly. That's reason enough. Her eyes met his. You don't believe I'm dangerous? He gave a low grunt. You can barely stand. You're no danger to me, miss. Something flickered in her gaze, a flash of pride, maybe, or sorrow. You don't know the people I ran from, she said softly. They'd rather see me dead than free. Cole's knife paused mid-stroke. Your people? She nodded slowly, turning her hands toward the fire. The skin around her fingers was cracked, mottled from frostbite. She didn't look at him when she spoke. They called me traitor, said I dishonored the chief. I ran before they could make an example of me. Her words sank into him like cold iron. So you're telling me, he said carefully, you're a fugitive from your own tribe. She didn't answer, just stared at the flames, her face carved with exhaustion. Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You realize what happens if anyone finds you here? The army rides out of Fort Bowie once a week. They see an Apache woman in my cabin. They'll hang me for aiding an enemy. She looked up, her eyes dark and steady. Then why did you help me? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because she looked lost. Because she was dying. Because her eyes had begged in a way that burned through all the stories he'd ever been told about Apaches. He didn't owe her an answer, and yet the silence between them demanded one. I don't let anyone freeze to death on my land, he said finally. She smiled faintly, bitterly. You saved me out of pity, out of decency. he corrected. Her eyes glimmered in the light. Decency gets men killed where I'm from. The way she said it sent a small chill down his spine. Cole stood and crossed the room, busying himself with the kettle. You hungry? He asked, though he already knew she hadn't eaten in days. Her silence was answer enough. He poured her a cup of broth and handed it to her. She drank slowly, cautiously, as though her body wasn't sure it trusted the warmth. When she finished, she set the cup down with shaking fingers. He could see her strength returning bit by bit, though her body still looked fragile. The firelight caught the line of her cheek. The braid that had come loose and now framed her face. He realized he was staring and looked away quickly. After a long stretch of silence, she spoke again, up this time in a whisper. You said there's a fort nearby, about 15 miles east. He said, army patrols sometimes pass through. Why? Her shoulders tensed. If they find me, they'll hand me back. My people traded prisoners before. I'd be dead before dawn. Cole frowned. You think they'd come this far to find you? She turned toward the window, where the frost was gathering on the glass again. You don't know my father, she said quietly. When an Apache chief loses his daughter, he doesn't stop searching. That struck him like a hammer blow. You're the chief's daughter? Taya's jaw tightened. Not anymore. Cole stared at her, the pieces slowly falling together. The exhaustion, the fear, the way she whispered in her sleep. This wasn't just some runway womana, this was someone with a name that carried weight and danger. So that's why you were out there, he muttered. You weren't lost, you were running from your tribe, and from the soldiers, she added. They wanted me as a bargaining token. She looked into the fire again, her voice hollow. I ran before either side could decide who owned me. Cole leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. Hell of a thing to run from both. I didn't run, she said sharply. I survived. For a moment, her tone startled him. It wasn't weak, it was fierce, the voice of someone who'd fought through more than cold and hunger. He looked at her differently now, saw not just a victim but something untamed like the land itself, scarred and beautiful. He wanted to ask more, but something outside caught his ear, a faint, distant sound. He stood, moving to the door. The wind was gone, yet there was a faint hum in the distance. He stepped outside, boots crunching the snow. There, on the far ridge, he saw a dim flicker of orange firelight. More than one. He froze, heart pounding. Torches. When he turned back inside, Taya was already standing, gripping the blanket tight around her shoulders. Her face had gone pale. They've come, she said softly. How the hell do you know? She pointed toward the window. I told you, my father's men don't stop. Cole swore under his breath and reached for his rifle. You brought them here, didn't you? I didn't mean to, she said quickly. They tracked me through the riverbeds. I thought the storm would hide me. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing toward the door. If they see smoke from this chimney, we're both dead. She moved closer, her voice trembling. You should leave. They'll kill you for helping me. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Leave my own land? I built this place with my bare hands. No one's running me off it. Her eyes softened, but her voice grew urgent. Then you'll die for me. Cole met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Maybe, but I'd rather die doing what's right than live knowing I let someone freeze to death. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The firelight flickered across their faces as his weathered, determined hair was fragile but full of fire. Outside, the drums began to echo faintly through the night air, slow and deliberate. Taya's breath caught. They're close. Cole loaded his rifle, the metallic click echoing in the small cabin. Then we'd better be ready. You can't fight them all, she whispered. He smiled grimly. Wouldn't be the first time I tried. The torches moved closer now, their glow spreading across the snow like veins of fire. The sound of hooves echoed faintly from the ridge. Taya stepped toward him, her eyes pleading. You don't understand. They're not just hunting me, they're hunting whoever took me. They think you stole me. Cole's jaw tightened. Then I guess they'll find out who's really stealing lives tonight. She grabbed his arm, her touch desperate and trembling. Please, see broken bar, don't kill them. They're my people. He looked down at her, conflicted. And what am I supposed to do? Taya, offer them tea? Her eyes glistened in the firelight. Hide me, just long enough for them to pass. I swear I'll go at dawn. Cole hesitated, his heart pounding like the drums outside. She was asking him to risk everything for a woman he'd known less than a day. a woman whose very name could bring war to his doorstep. But when he saw the terror in her face, the raw, pleading humanity in her eyes, that decision made itself. He grabbed his coat and nodded toward the trapdoor beneath the rug. "Get down there, stay quiet." She stared at him, unsure. "You trust me?" "No," he said, pulling the rug aside. "But I'm not letting them take you either." And as she disappeared into the darkness below, the drums outside grew louder and closer until the night itself seemed to hold its breath.